Good morning.
Morning.
Morning, folks. Good morning. That's better. How are you today?
Fantastic.
So it's April 28th. What does that mean?
Finals next week.
It means finals are next week. Exactly. It means graduation is around the corner, right? So for many of you who are graduating this May or perhaps later this year, you have hopefully either started your job search or are seriously considering how to go about it. So given the timing, we thought that it would be a great opportunity to have with us this morning Dr. David McGee, Director of University Career Services, to discuss public health job searching and to provide us with some tips and guidelines about conducting an effective job search. Dr. McGee is with us for the grand finale. This is the final breakfast with the experts for this spring semester. He is a wonderful colleague. He is a dear friend. He has actually, this is his third time presenting as part of this program. I think we try to do at least one breakfast with the expert presentation with Dr. McGee every year. But he's also given career development workshops outside this program to our college students at different times. And I believe he is currently planning with our Assistant Dean for Student Services a series of professional development programs that will be kicked off this fall. And this professional development program is going to center around 6 core areas that you, the students, have identified as important for your professional development. So stay tuned for more information about that program. But for now, I will turn it over to Dr. McGee. Thank you for being with us, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Corey. It's good to be here this morning. Appreciate the opportunity to meet with all of you. It's always good to come to the College of Public Health. And when I got out of bed this morning, it occurred to me, I do a lot of talking about resumes and cover letters and really riveting things like that, really exciting things. And what if I knew more about public health? So I went to the only place I know to get some great information in a hurry, and that was your website. So let me ask you this. First of all, how many of you are graduating this year? A few, okay. Out of the 4 of you, I think, how many have already located a position? Okay, see me after the presentation. No, I'm kidding. Hopefully, this will help all of you think about some things that may be helpful to you as you proceed with your job search. So anyway, I was thinking last night about public health and what makes it different from other areas of health science, and it occurred to me that most of us in the population think about health in terms of health care. We go to our doctor, we talk to one or more persons, and we get a diagnosis or we get a pat on the back. And my doctor always hands me the diet sheet. Have you read this yet? So a little encouragement in terms of taking care of ourselves. But then when you think about the world of public health, of course, it has to do with populations. And to me, it's kind of the big picture. So I looked up some definitions, and I noticed on one of your YouTube presentations, there was a presenter who said, public health, at the bottom line, manages the health of populations, which is, of course, an oversimplification, but to me, it kind of gets at the heart of public health. And then went through a number of other variables, but I won't get into those in detail. So here in the college, you've got environmental health and safety. How many of you are focusing on that area? Okay. Workers beware. Health sciences. Health sciences management.
So, there's health sciences and there's health services management. They're two different departments. So
I'm new at this.
So which one do you want?
Health sciences. Health services management. All right. Got a pretty good group there. Biostatistics and epidemiology. Impressive. That's great. Community and behavioral health. Super. Appalachia needs you, as well as many places around the globe. So, good to see a representation of all of the concentrations here. And I had a lot of fun looking through this. So, do any of you want to take this opportunity to impress the dean and some professors with what you know about your concentration and tell me a little bit more what it's about? Yeah, you've already done that, right? That's okay. That's good. I just want to say as I go along and talk about some things here this morning, I want you to feel like this is an opportunity to be interactive, to ask questions. I want you to relax and enjoy the program and not feel like this is just a presentation that you have to sit and listen to. So, I did want to mention one other thing. I was talking with the dean this morning, and he said that all of his daughters have gone into healthcare with the exception of one who's gone into veterinary science. Which, you know, if you're a dog, that's a very important form of healthcare, or any of a number of other animals. But it reminded me that one of the things I wanted to do today was have you analyze a job description. And try to pick out what in that job description is important. So a little later in the presentation, we will do that. But one of the first job descriptions I looked at was for a public health officer with the Air Force. And I looked at it, and it talked about how important this job was and how many people it impacted. And when it got to requirements for the position, one of the requirements listed was a master's degree in public health or a doctorate of veterinary science. So there's hope. What those two things have to do with each other in terms of qualifications, I'm mystified, but it is the military. And maybe they need somebody with expertise in avian flu. I don't know. But you see some interesting kinds of combinations that show up in job descriptions, which is really one of the neat things about a job search, and that is getting out and exploring all the opportunities that are available to you. And in public health, there are many, some of which you might expect as a result of your major, and others which are going to be interesting and a little bit different, and things that will challenge you to continue learning new things right away as you get into them. So it's a good market, I think, for people in public health, but it's important to keep the big perspective, both in terms of geography and identifying opportunities that fit you, and perhaps not the specific job descriptions that you've been exposed to as a student. Make sense? Okay, so what I'm going to do is start out by going through some of the basics of the job search and what's important about things like resumes, how to prepare for an interview, present yourself for an interview, and cover the basics. And then I'm going to have you do a couple of exercises and kind of get involved a little bit. And then we'll take another look more specifically at some resources that we have on our website for careers in public health. So, to start at the beginning, we're going to talk a bit about resumes. So in talking about this, I used to use PowerPoint, which just last week reached the end of its life in terms of our use of the particular PowerPoint that we have. We're going to change it for next year. Because when you're talking about things like resumes, it's a whole lot easier to have a resume in front of you than to stare at a screen with an image on it. It's a lot easier to see. So as you look at this document, I'll just ask a question. Is there anything that stands out or is obvious about it? As a document that is designed to help someone find employment.
It's one page.
It's one page. How important is that? If you are a new graduate, a one-page resume is a good idea. And this concept actually started in business, in the business environment, because it reflects the fact that people don't have a lot of time to read things like resumes anymore. In fact, HR practitioners tell us that they spend somewhere between 10 to 12 seconds on a resume. Isn't that impressive? So that's why having a resume that's designed like this is very important. You'll notice that there's balance on the page, there's some white space, the heading is fairly straightforward. Your resume is important as your marketing document, and that all comes down to how well you write your bullet points and how well they demonstrate your accomplishments and your transferable skills from previous positions to the one that you want to attain. It's not a place to use fancy fonts or show off your artistic ability. I see a lot of people wanting to do that, primarily liberal arts types, right? But I'm being a little facetious. That's fine, I understand the impulse, but you're really writing this for the reader, and what you want to do is guide their eye through the resume as quickly as possible. So, education, health services experience, additional experience, professional development, and activities and community involvement. When I look at this resume, it occurs to me that additional experience in some cases can be valuable, especially if you're just graduating with a bachelor's degree. You may not have, hopefully you have some health services experience, but you may not have as much, and you want to expand on those things a little bit. So learning how to look at even simple jobs, which undergraduates very often have, identify what's important about them, and translate them into transferable skills for the reader is important. And we spend a lot of time editing resumes in career services. Those are the kinds of things we focus on. So if you did a typical undergraduate off-campus job or on-campus job, what was there about that in terms of customer service and helping the efficiency and effectiveness of the office, if it was an office you worked in? How do you talk about those things in your resume that demonstrate that you've developed compassion, ability to serve other people, that you're well organized, and other things that really apply at a basic level to the expectations of employers for a lot of positions. In any event, a couple of other things. You'll notice that this is a design that is consistent from beginning to end. So there are some variations on this theme. You can, for example, if you don't have long sentences and you have a lot of space on the right side of your page, you can move your dates into a margin so that they're internally aligned or they're aligned on the right margin, and it creates a border for the other side of the page. I think in this resume, that's not critical, but there are a lot of things that you can do to maintain consistency and make your resume look more attractive. Why? Because again, it's all about leading the eye of the reader and having them see what you want them to see. The other thing you may notice is that every bullet point starts with an action verb in past tense. that's very critical because it puts you in movement. It says, I was there, I was moving, I was doing some things. And one of the handouts that I have, I'm not going to pass it out now because that's time consuming, but I have this wonderful list called Action Verbs by Skill Set. It's something that I got off the web, and I've seen a lot of lists like this. This one is quite effective because it breaks it out into things like people and communication skills and other skill sets that you use in your job. So this is good, and I'll leave it here on the front table. I think I have enough copies for all of you. If I don't,
I can make extras.
okay. If I don't, Dr. Corey has volunteered to make some extras, so good resource. And that's one of the other weak points I see in some resumes. Some people tend to find an action verb they really like investigated or researched, and then you see it over and over again in different sections. And it's okay to repeat something like researched, but you also want to look for ways to use it differently. Performed research. Worked with Dr. Corey on a research project. Try not to be repetitive in the same way. And another resume rule is do not repeat an accomplishment in 2 jobs or 3 jobs over and over again. Say it once, because once you say that you have excellent research skills, you're accomplished at interpersonal relations, and you've proven that in several different work environments, as well as class projects, as well as in working on class projects as a member of a team, something like that. Once you've said that, you don't need to say it again. Because again, you're getting a very quick glimpse here, and if you're making people look at the same thing even twice, you're wasting precious fractions of a second. So some of you may be wondering why the world is like that. I mean, you're going to put hours into writing a good resume. Hopefully you will have it edited to get another perspective on what you've written. And then somebody's going to just breeze through it. Well, it's all about the competitive nature of the workplace today, and the fact that even people in HR who are professionals and go through these, go through hundreds of resumes a day, perhaps more, just don't have the time to really read word for word what's in there. So they have learned over time to scan it. And there are keywords in the job description, and they're looking to find a relationship between what they've defined as the characteristics they're looking for and what you have in your resume. So that leads us to another point. Do you write just one resume and send it to everybody, no matter what? No. You write a core resume. I mean, I encourage you to write a resume before you get to the point where you want to apply for a position, because you may need it quickly. But before you send a resume in for a position that you're excited about, make sure that you read the job description and understand what people are looking for. And then tailor your resume to fit that to the extent that you can. Does that make sense? So you may have some abandoned skill sets floating around out there that you didn't put on your main resume because you felt, well, they're tertiary to some other things I've done. And that's fine, but you may have to go back to some of those and include them in a resume and reformat things a little bit, maybe change the order of your bullet points to focus on some things that are dead on with the job description. So, again, you need a core resume. I encourage all of you to go ahead and do that no matter where you're at in your studies at this point, because it's something you'll always need. But then continue to change and modify it. And once you've written a good resume, it's something that you can keep on file for the rest of your life, carry it with you, and continue to update and modify as you go along. So as you advance in your career, change positions, that's a document that you can continue to use. That's a quick overview. Are there any questions at this point?
The one thing you see sometimes is the personal statement or the job seeking statement. What do you think about that at the top of the resume?
That's a good question, Dean Wyckoff. I appreciate it. And I think that it depends. So if you're at a point in your career where there are specific accomplishments that you want people to know about, almost regardless of what you're applying for, you can write a personal statement, or it's sometimes just called a summary, that highlights some of your strong points. And that's fine. That's good. It's saying, look, I've developed an expertise in this area. This is what I'm pursuing, as long as it is consistent with where you're going. Some people write an objective statement. I am looking for a position as. Don't do that. That's why you have a cover letter. And some people think cover letters are out of style because we don't mail resumes anymore. But a cover letter forces you to structure a statement about yourself that introduces you and covers your strongest points quickly. And even if you're doing online applications, which many of you will do, you can take that cover letter and put it in a little box that says, tell us something about yourself. And of course, like the resume, you may want to modify it, but at least you'll have that resource available. So I always encourage people to keep writing cover letters. Yes.
And I was just wondering where on this resume would you put independent research, especially if you were applying to a research field?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Where would you put research on this resume? You would put it under a heading called research.
So you make it.
So I guess the point is that there's nothing magical about these headings. Okay, they're sample headings. You need to create headings that fit you. So on some resumes, students will put academic honors if they've been consistently on the dean's list or otherwise been recognized for academic achievement. Other people may focus on community service and add that section. Now, at the bottom here, you see activities and community involvement, so that's an example. Some students may not use that because they spent the bulk of their time on research projects, so then you create your own heading. So any heading that you need to demonstrate your individuality, your strengths, feel free, write it in. Yes.
Dr. McGee, in the section there's GPA listed under masters. What's your take on that?
That there's no GPA listed? It's interesting. We hand out sample resumes all the time, and they're always imperfect. I don't know why that is. But my advice to this student would be either include the GPA that goes with your master's degree, if it's respectable, so that it doesn't stand out that you have one for a bachelor's but not for a master's. If it's not as high as you'd like it to be, then don't put a GPA on your resume at all. See, there really is no requirement for the specific information that needs to be on your resume. So for me, the bottom line is, this is your marketing document, right? If what you put on your resume is marketing yourself, or what some people call your brand for an interview, that's great. If it's something that is going to raise questions that you don't want to answer, leave it off. Is that dishonest? No, because there's no requirement that you have a GPA on your resume, for example. And if an employer is really concerned about that, they will ask you. And then you have an honest conversation. Never exaggerate anything. It's always important to be very straightforward and honest about what your accomplishments are and things like GPA, because everything can be checked. These are good questions. Any others? I think that
What about languages?
What about languages?
Yeah, like if you're fluent in other languages, should you put it on your resume, even if it's not necessarily in the job description? Or do you think just to leave it off?
Oh, I would say that it should definitely be included, so there are a number of ways to do that. If you have an extensive language portfolio, you can put it under languages. If you want to highlight one or two additional languages that you understand and use well, you might put them under a heading that's called skills or professional skills. And there you can list languages as well as other experiences or other knowledge that you possess that relates to your career. So sometimes languages can go on one line where you're putting some computer programs that you know on another. And you can call them professional skills. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, should you highlight, like, if you know one more than the other, if you're fluent in writing and oral? Like, I've seen some resumes that have, like, Spanish, and you specify how well you know the language, and then if you don't know another language, but you're not as good communicating in one way versus another, like, would you just leave it off if it, like, I don't know, should you specify how well you are in a certain way?
Well, I'll give you my favorite answer. It all depends. So if that language capability is something that the employer is looking for, then I think it's important that you classify it. So if you're very strong in one language and the employer is looking for it, elaborate a little bit. Strong verbal and written ability would be one way to say it. I would almost say if you're marginal about using the language, it might be better not to list it at all. Because what goes on your resume, again, is what you're marketing. So if somebody says to you, well, how fluent are you with French? Because we need to hire somebody to work on a research project with some universities near Paris, and we need somebody that can really get into some depth topics in the French language. And you know that you're conversational, but there's no way that you're going to have a conversation about research. Maybe that shouldn't be on your resume. Or you can classify it. You can say conversational French.
David, just a word of caution. Where I was before here, if someone had a language skill on their resume, the interview would often be conducted in that language.
Is that right?
Yeah, so just be careful not to say that you can't speak.
Yeah, that's a good example.
We were an international organization, but if someone said they spoke Spanish fluently, the interview could often be conducted in Spanish, if it was part of the job.
That's a very interesting point. I haven't heard that before, but it makes sense, especially if you're applying with an international organization, that could happen. So, another word of caution. I wouldn't list languages that are marginal for you. Reminds me of my daughter-in-law. Every once in a while, I ask her, how many languages do you speak? She was a German exchange student who my son married. And she speaks German and French and Dutch and English. Her English is better than my son's. I'm not sure how that happened, except that she was much more formal and careful about it, I think. She has virtually no accent. It's very hard to detect. But, if she were applying for a position in any of those countries, she could handle the language. But that's a lot more typical, I think, of people in Europe, because they're exposed to other languages, and so they have an opportunity to use them on a regular basis in daily life. Something that most of us in the United States don't have unless we live near a population of people who have immigrated from other countries. So anyway, I hope we've answered the question and you're not confused about whether to list something or not. Okay, another question.
Is there a particular style to date your resume? Because I see your date from left to right, from right to left, and using one of your resources, I was told to date from left to right.
Say that again. Who told you to date from left to right?
At the Career Center, when I took one of my resumes there.
Really? Come to us the next time. Here's my problem with that. First of all, it's become not common practice to put dates on the left, and there's a reason for it. Again, somebody's scanning your resume, right? So people, when they read, how do they read? Left to right. If you put your date in the left-hand column, you're saying, the first thing I want you to know about me is when I was there. Doesn't make sense. It's really not. The first thing you want them to know about you is what your title was, followed by who your employer was, where they were located, and then the date you were there. So put your date on the right. Again, you may choose to put your dates in a column on the right, or you can do it just the way it's done here with a comma and your dates. Anything else? I appreciate your questions. Resumes can be tricky, so it's good to get into the nitty-gritty. The next thing I'm going to distribute is a copy of a cover letter, and this is actually a cover letter for a chemical lab tech position, not something that you're going to be applied for, but I use it because I really like the model, and it demonstrates to me how simple and direct a cover letter can be. And again, because people don't want to take the time to read long paragraphs, keeping it simple and direct is important. So I'll wait until this moves around a little bit. I want to point out some things here that are relatively easy to overlook. In the first sentence, this person says, Kristen says, I was pleased to find your announcement of a chemical lab technician position on your website today. Do you see anything different about that sentence?
Website should be one word.
Very good. You would be a difficult reviewer. But what I really want to point out is that most cover letters say, I am writing to apply for, or I am applying for your position of. And to me, that's kind of a throwaway. It's like, really? Is that why I have a cover letter in my hand? Because you're applying for this. So this says, I was pleased to find your announcement. I was excited to discover is another way to say that. There are ways to infuse a bit of emotion in here that says, I'm really interested in this. And to do that right in the first sentence, I think, is the way to start and get someone's attention.
That always grated my nerves. Whenever to me, it felt like schmoozing.
Schmoozing, I was pleased.
Well, I mean, like I know why I've got their cover letter. I was pleased. I was excited. I always thought, I don't know. It always bothered me. I don't know why.
Okay. All
That was just my personal thing. It just felt like right off the bat I'm trying to, I don't know. I get the idea of emotion behind it, but I know why they're applying. I know why I have their cover letter. I just want them to get down to business and tell me tell me about yourself so I can.
Just the details, please.
Yeah.
See, he had even fewer seconds than we typically.
No, literally, it was tops 30 seconds. I would look for a minute,
Right.
say no. It literally was that.
Okay, and to say I was pleased or I was excited to.
I don't know.
That would be a negative for you.
It didn't mean that I didn't look at it. I just went, oh god.
Okay, so the lesson to take from this question is do not apply to this man. No, I'm joking.
I read it as a positive because this person was looking at my website.
That's
This was an aggressive act on that student's part. They're saying they wanted to work for me.
Yes.
Because they were looking at my website. They didn't say
Yes.
I saw it in publichealthjobs.com or anything else.
Right.
So that's how I read it. But
Yeah.
I was maybe pleased. Doesn't seem too schmoozy.
I don't know. That's just a personal thing. I just thought I'd share
They
it.
said I was really
Well, that raises another interesting point, though. The world is full of anecdotes about what people like to see in cover letters and resumes and what they don't. And it's very much related to our personality, the way we perceive things. It's neither positive or negative. It just is. So I've heard people say some pretty wild things about how they got a job or what they said that worked that I would never recommend to other people. Because, in that situation, great. I'm pleased that worked for you. But in general, maybe not. So Dean Wyckoff raises another excellent point. It goes on to say, on your website today, which means, hey, I was looking at you. So that might soften pleased to find.
Well, no, I get that. Look,
Yeah, okay. You just don't like it.
I just never liked it. That's right. It comes down to culture. There's no.
Right.
And I never would see that and go, I'm not going to look at this person. I was always just like, ugh.
It's not a deal breaker, so.
Okay, so if you're a statistician and you're really excited about epidemiology and you're applying to people who may not appreciate the softer side of life, avoid being in any way expressive about emotion. And I don't know if that's you or not.
No.
But there are cultural differences. There are seriously cultural differences. I had a young man say to me once, I applied to this software company, and it's a little tiny company in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he said they'd never asked me to come in for an interview, but they invited me to a Friday night party because they have a party every Friday afternoon. They just take Friday afternoon off and they go somewhere and enjoy kicking off the weekend. So they invited me to come, and he said half the people were intoxicated, and the head of the company, the owner of the company, talked to me for a while, but he seemed like he was intoxicated, and I didn't really understand what was going on or how to respond. Was I in an interview? Dean Wyckoff is shaking his head yes, and so are some others. You're right. That was his interview. And it was all about fit. Do you fit in with this group? Are you able to fit? Are you flexible? Or are you judgmental? And if you know anything about small software companies, they're pretty loose. I talked to one owner who had nothing but beanbag chairs for office furniture. And one of his great enjoyments in life was seeing a salesperson come in with a jacket or a suit and tie on to talk to him about some equipment or other product and sit in a beanbag chair. There's really, some things are really hard to judge. And I tell people, expect anything when you go to an interview. You just don't know whether you're going to sit down and meet with one person who's going to make a decision because she is the hiring manager, or whether you're going to meet with a group, whether you're going to meet with a person in the morning, 2 more people in the afternoon, and the staff's going to take you to lunch in between. You just have to go with the flow and be ready for whatever happens. Friday night party, I don't know. I think I would have had a very hard time with that myself. What is going on here?
But back to that highlights the point though that this is a two-way interview.
It is.
I mean,
Very much.
It's just as much about them interviewing you as you interviewing that company to see if that's a
Right.
good, or is the culture right, is the
Yes.
organization right.
Yes.
If you're not a drinker, you wouldn't want to work for that software company.
Probably not. Not if that was their Friday afternoon ritual on a consistent basis. Okay. I'm glad you raised the point, though, because that's a good conversation to have. And it kind of segues into another point. One of the things that people find stressful about the job search, in fact, the main thing that people find stressful is none of us like rejection. People don't like rejection. I thought I was great for that job and they turned me down. Or I thought I was perfect for that and they didn't even interview me. And I tell people this. There's no way to predict what's really going on, not just in an interview, but in the entire application process. So I tell people, stay in the job search until it's over. When's it over? When you get a job offer and you accept it. Stay in the job search. I hear too many people say, oh, I applied for this job that I really want with Eastman Chemical Company and I'm going to wait, but I haven't heard from them in a month. What should I do? My answer is apply for similar positions in other places and stay in the job search. And if you know someone in HR, or even if you don't, it's okay to call after 3 weeks and ask this question. Hello, I applied for position number 7928, Chem Lab Tech. I'm really interested in that position. And I applied 4 weeks ago. Can you tell me when you expect to make a decision or what the length of your search process is? You don't ask, am I going to get the job? You ask about the search process and what the status is. And that's a perfectly acceptable question to ask. So it is a two-way street, and I think sometimes, especially with smaller companies, they may just wait for somebody to take the initiative to get in touch with them. Oh, this person's the only one that called me. I'll talk to him. Come on in. So stay involved, be conversant. We'll talk to a little bit more about this when we get into networking. But to finish the cover letter, so there's an introduction here, and she talks about reading the website, and it reflects a culture that she feels comfortable with based on reading the website. What's important about that? Well, one of the main questions people have is, again, do you fit? And if I hire you, will you stay here? Because hiring people is expensive. The companies spend a lot of money on it. Nonprofits spend a lot of money on it. And people want to hire someone who wants to be there. So that's an important message. The middle paragraph is a chance for you to market your strengths. It may be a middle 2 or 3 paragraphs if you have a lot to say about yourself. There's nothing magical about 3. This is just a simple cover letter for a new graduate. And then the conclusion is, my resume is enclosed for your review. I sincerely appreciate your time and consideration. Hope to meet you for a personal interview. We're getting soft and fuzzy here again. What I say is, you're thanking the person who's looking at your credentials for the time they're spending with you on paper, right? I think that's a positive way to end a cover letter because you're recognizing the time that they're spending on it. Pure and simple. Yes? No?
No, look, I do like it. Look, I do like emotion. I didn't mean to come off as, but it just seemed like sometimes it would come off as so schmoozy. I guess I don't know how else to put that, but.
Well, yeah, and seriously, you're making a good point. I mean, you don't want to go overboard with.
Well, they would say things like, "I feel like I'm tremendously qualified for this," right?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, well, I'm glad you can judge that.
Yes.
Without, I'm the one hiring you. You tell me you're.
Well, exactly, and I see a lot of cover letters that say, "I am the perfect person for this job."
Well,
and
that's
I say,
the kind of thing I'm talking about.
That's a decision the employer makes. don't make that assertion about yourself. You can say that you believe that you're well qualified based on certain things, but it's the employer's decision.
The one I find I would react more negatively to is when they're overly effusive in their praise for me or the organization.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, what an honor it would be to work for someone of your reputation.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Then I wonder what's wrong with their resume.
Right. It may be worth a handshake at a conference, but it doesn't go much further than that, right? Yeah. You have written the most brilliant research project I've ever read in my life. Okay, so I want to move into interviews, but before I do, I'll just say that with the cover letter and resume, there are a lot of other written materials in a job search. The obvious one is a thank you letter, so if somebody does invite you in for an interview, you want to follow up very quickly with a thank you. Yes?
Before you move into interviews, I just have one quick question.
Sure.
What advice do you have on selecting appropriate references, not just for careers, but if you're going back to graduate school or some kind of continuing education? I get that question a lot from students who are applying to the program.
Right.
On what kind of references are you looking for? So do you have any advice on selecting appropriate references?
Sure. I mean, the first thing that you obviously want to do is think about people that you've had a good relationship with. And you know that because you've had a lot of good two-way conversations, perhaps. Perhaps you've done some research work together or worked on projects. A good person to ask for a reference. And you want to stick with people who can comment on your professional skill set. So family members, your pastor at church, you know, the folks that they have no credibility as references. So it needs to be a professional reference. And beyond that, I encourage people to treat a reference as an ally in your job search. So you want to have a good conversation with them. And don't just say, Dr. Wyckoff, will you write me a reference? Now I know that he would handle that very, very well because he's been through it a number of times. I'm schmoozing you. But you want to have a conversation about that. Let the person you're asking know what it is you're applying for example. Well, where are you going? Because that helps them frame, first of all, how to provide a good reference for you, and also frame their ability to effectively comment on that skill set. So have a conversation about where you see yourself going, and then stay in touch with your reference. I got in the habit quite a while ago of getting in touch with a reference anytime that I got an indication that somebody was seriously considering my application or wanted me to come in for an interview. I let my reference know. You may hear from this person, and this is what the position is about. And I never heard anybody complain about that. It was like, thank you. Because sometimes these calls come out of the blue. They can come, you know, just as you're leaving your desk in the evening or first thing in the morning, and it takes you a while to sort out, let's see now, which reference was this and for what kind of position. And if you give people a heads up, I think that's very helpful.
Just to add to that, I find it very helpful if the student will say, you may recall that we worked together on these projects, or I had you in this, you know, even
Yes.
you may think your reference knows you better than your reference thinks they know you.
Yes.
So a little reminder of what you did together, why,
Mhm.
or even the things you'd like them to comment on.
Yes.
That's helpful. They may not do that, but at least it reminds them.
Another excellent point. And then in that conversation I'm talking about, I encourage people to say, do you feel comfortable giving me a positive reference for this position? Because it gives the person a chance to say, or to, you know, if they have qualifications, to tell you what they are. And if they say, yes, I do, what it means is, yes, they feel comfortable giving you a positive recommendation, which is very critical. Because if you get a reference that's mostly good, but not quite, there may be some reservations in there, that's not a reference you want. You want a reference that's positive, that says, this is a good person to work with. It's not a personal analysis of strengths and weaknesses. It should be a good supportive reference. So I encourage people just to ask the question up front, are you comfortable with this? And in my own practice, I'm always totally honest with people. If I don't feel that I can write them a good reference, I tell them that, and I tell them why. So that it's upfront and it's understood. Then they can go on to find the reference they really need. And the last example I had was a young woman who met with me in my office several times, and she was a bright student and seemed very capable. She asked me for a reference, and I had to say to her, we've had great conversations. I've enjoyed working with you, but I really don't know enough about your background and experience and skills to be a strong reference for you. So I encourage you to talk to your faculty and some faculty members that can comment in more depth on your qualifications. Does that answer your question? That's one of my habits. No question has a short answer. Okay. So we were going to talk about job interviews. And before we get into questions, let me ask for a volunteer to come up and shake my hand. Would anyone like to do that? Okay, now you and I, set the stage here. You and I are meeting for the first time because I have invited you in for an interview. Okay? Good morning, I'm Dave McGee. I'm pleased to meet you this morning.
Thank you. I'm pleased to meet you as well.
Okay, very good. That was easy, wasn't it? But we're all set. Yes. We can shake hands again. But you did it right the first time.
Right, okay.
So you passed. Otherwise, you would still be here. Anyway, that's multitasking. She did several things very well. Her posture was maybe a little bit, she did like a little curtsy. But posture-wise, you want your back straight. You want to stand up, full size, keep your shoulders square. Good morning. I'm pleased to meet you because that exudes what?
Confidence.
Confidence. You got to have it. She also did some other things very well. When she shook my hand, she made contact at the base of the thumb and then gave me a good handshake. So when you reach out to shake hands with somebody, make contact at the base of the thumb. Then you have a good handshake. I'm sure that most of you have had the experience of having somebody grab the tips of your fingers and squeeze them. Doesn't always feel great, especially if you're wearing a ring. So just make sure that you make good hand contact. Two other things. She looked at me. She looked me straight in the eye and smiled and said, "Pleased to meet you too." It's a challenge for all of the guys in this room. It's multitasking. But you've got to do all of those things at once to make a good first impression. And again, I've worked with a number of people who have been invited to interviews, but they never seem to work out well. So one of the first things I check is body language. And a lot of people just are not aware of their own actions and how that projects an image to someone else. So sociologists say that we form impressions of other people very quickly, like within seconds. And those first impressions tend to be durable. They last. So if you make a bad first impression, you're off to a really challenging start to reestablishing your credibility, because that's what sticks. So something to be aware of. And I'm assuming that all of you know all the typical expectations of going in for an interview, that you should be there 10 minutes early. not a half hour, because that's annoying. Somebody has to store you somewhere. 10 minutes. It says, I'm here early, ready to go, anxious to have this conversation. Work with a company in Knoxville with a recruiter who passes everybody along to his supervisor who makes the final decision. And a supervisor invites people to lunch. Everybody. The interview is over lunch. If he's sitting at the table and he's looking at his watch and the second hand hits noon and they're not sitting across from him, he leaves. There's no lunch. There's no conversation. Not everybody is that rigid, but the expectation is that you will be a bit early. So it's really important to check the GPS, have a conversation with Siri on your iPhone, make sure you have the directions to get there, that you understand where you're going to park, and exactly how long it takes to walk to the office. It takes a lot of presence of mind to do this in the right way. Any questions about that? Of course, you all know it, right? How do you dress? Sir, would you just stand up for me? There it is. I want you all to tell him after the presentation how great he looked. Just really lay it on him.
It's into the
Now,
semester.
David, will be going to that Friday afternoon party.
No, not the Friday afternoon party. But in most environments, professional settings, you want to wear, if you're a male, a suit and tie. And the preferred colors traditionally are a gray, light gray for the summer, maybe darker gray in the wintertime, or navy blue. I see increasingly that black is being promoted as an interview color. Traditionally, it's viewed as overwhelming, a little too much of a power color, but culture changes, so, maybe black is coming back into style, and it's okay. What do you think?
I have to agree that the black, I think, sometimes is overwhelming. Kind of looks like funeral or
Right.
executive. I agree.
Can be that way.
I put out too many opinions today, so I need to rein that in.
Well, I'm flexible because this is a learning process for all of us. There are rules for everything, and every rule has an exception. Except for one that we're going to talk about, and that is never, ever say anything negative in an interview. Just don't do it. It's always a mistake. So that's a rule to remember. Okay, so we're at the interview. By the way, women, similar to men, wear a good, attractive pantsuit, professional looking, with a jacket, pastel or white blouse, minimal jewelry. That applies to both men and women.
Does this work?
It works. Mostly. No. You're almost there. Your shirt's a little longer than your jacket, though. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah, too stylish.
Yeah. So, we got that over. Your shirt should be tucked in.
Once you get the job, you can get away with it.
That's right.
Being stylish.
It's like interviewing to be a faculty member. Go straight from that sport jacket into your jeans and t-shirt.
I'm still interviewing.
But you've been to those meetings, right? Where you feel maybe a little overdressed.
That's okay. That's I've been doing it for years. I'm used to it.
Did everyone get one? Everyone got one?
I think they do have some. Day 150, typical interview questions. How are we doing on time?
We have about 10 minutes.
We have 10 minutes? Okay, these are 150 interview questions. Read them and practice. This comes from an online resource. You all may want to write this down because I think a lot of it. And it used to be on the bottom of the page for attribution. Oh, wait a minute. It's at the top. Okay, source. See where it says source at the top of the page? www.quintcareers.com. It is a great job search site for things like this. They go through all the nitty-gritty of the job search, all the things you need to know, a lot of great advice. It's a site that was started by a group of private career consultants, and they have some annoying ads, but they're not pop-ups, they're not things that really are obnoxious. They just have to advertise to keep their site up. You can look past all of that and get into their material. It's all very well developed. So the only thing I'm going to point out to you here, given our time limitations, is that it starts off with traditional interview questions. How would you describe yourself? Or tell me about yourself and why you're interested in this position. Well, there are a couple of variations on the thing, but that's the first question you have to be ready for, which is another good reason to write a good cover letter. Tell me about yourself. If you start at birth, you're in trouble. So they want to know, really, what have you done lately, and why are you interested in this position? What are your major qualifications? It may all be in writing, but they want to hear you say it. And they want to hear how you say it. Again, are you confident? Do you know what your strengths are? Are you able to articulate clearly what you want the employer to know about you? So practice it. So anyway, it starts off with typical questions that a lot of interviewers ask. As you get toward the center and the back, it kind of changes into behavioral questions. So behavioral questions are in use in most interviews now to some extent. They may be just a subset of a traditional interview, or if you go into corporate life, you may find people that ask you nothing but behavioral questions. It can be very disconcerting if that's not what you're expecting. So you would go into an interview, for example, and some people would start asking you things like this. What was the toughest challenge you ever faced? What sort of things have you done to become better qualified for your career? Those are some of the easier ones. Give me a specific example of a time when you used good judgment and logic in solving a problem. So the behavioral question always asks, tell me about a time when you did, right? And by the time you do this for half an hour, 40 minutes, and they haven't asked you anything about yourself, you may be wondering what's going on. What's going on is that they hired a consultant who sold them a set of behavioral interview questions and said, if you get this kind of answer to this question, it's a good answer. And if you get enough positive points, then you've gotten through the behavioral interview. Why do people do that? Anybody want to take a guess? Why would somebody do that? It's all based on the theory that your past behavior is the best predictor of your present and your future behavior. And if I understand that, I will understand whether you're going to be a good employee in this position or not. Pure and simple. So it requires some creativity in terms of identifying situations that had a positive outcome, that you played a positive role in, that you can use in answer to the question. You have to think on your feet. The other thing I recommend to people is to think STAR. Use the STAR system. Situation, task, action, result. This is the situation I was in, the task or challenge that I faced, the action I took, and the result. Okay? Because that's a thorough answer to a behavioral interview question. If you don't cover those points, people are likely to ask you follow-up questions. oh, when did this happen? What was that exact situation? So it's important to practice these and get used to the format. Now, you may well be asked behavioral questions that aren't printed here. In fact, I would expect that you would. And some of these you may never be asked in your life. But it's getting used to that format of questions and answers that's important. Yes?
Sometimes during the interviewer asks you this question, like, what's your weakness?
Yes.
And what do you think is the best way to answer?
Okay, the question is, what if somebody asks you about your weakness? Or tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. Strengths are fun, right? I'm a highly organized person. Skilled in research and ready to go to work in the world of public health. I'm excited about it. Whoops. I consider this to be an excellent professional opportunity, and I'm pleased to have this conversation with you today.
I really am an emotional person. I mean, that's not the core. I say, I use those adjectives all the time. Never mind.
Okay.
I learned the word fantastic from Karan. I didn't know the word fantastic.
Okay.
Weakness.
Where were we? Weaknesses. Thank you. I walk on these tangents. Where did I start?
About your weakness?
That is a weakness. That is a weakness as a public presenter. Don't do tangents. Okay. So I said never say anything negative in an interview. I encourage people to think of weaknesses that they've identified, they've worked with, and they've overcome. So you might say, well, I have a tendency to procrastinate. I had that conversation with somebody this morning. I said, if it weren't for the last minute, I don't know when I actually get things done. But, so last minutes are important to me. That's, anyway. So you might say, I have tended to procrastinate in the past because I'm a perfectionist and I want to get everything just right. And so I do a lot of thinking about it. But as a result of my experience as a student and in my work positions, I have learned to do things both quickly and well. That's your weakness. Is it negative? Anybody? Does that sound negative? Okay. So try to avoid direct answers to that. I mean, be honest, but qualify the question. Identify how you've dealt with it, how you've recognized that you've dealt with it. That's the important thing. And that creates a positive impression rather than, oh man, I've never been able to get out of bed before 10 o'clock. Getting there at 8, dude, I don't know. That's not the kind of weakness you want to talk about. Okay. That was a good question. Any others? If you're creative, you can always find a positive answer to a negative question. Okay, the guide to networking for career opportunities. I'm going to just put this up here along with my action verbs and let you pick these up. The reason being that networking is a critical skill. On 4 pages, this outlines how to structure networking into a formal process. Please read through it and consider it. And the one thing that's not really explained well on there is the self-introduction. It's how you introduce yourself to somebody quickly, also called the elevator speech. So if you met somebody at a conference and they were connected with an organization you're interested in and you got on the elevator together, what would you say to them before they got to the 10th floor? Hi, my name is... Fill in the blanks. Hi, my name is...
Amal.
Thank you. The rest of you, nameless. I am graduating with a degree from the East Tennessee State University College of Public Health with a focus in healthcare management. I didn't say that right, did I?
Close. You passed.
And I'm really interested in learning more about careers in your organization. Can I talk with you about that at some point during this conference, or is there someone else that you'd recommend that I talk with? Just to learn more about the company and about opportunities. I visited your website, but I have some additional questions, something like that. Right? Okay. That is the start of networking. And the idea with networking is not to use up your network contacts, but to keep expanding them by always ending your self-introduction with a question, is this something that I can talk with you about? Or would you recommend someone to me that I can talk with? LinkedIn is becoming increasingly popular in our online world as a networking resource. My best advice to you, if you want to use LinkedIn, is go to LinkedIn and read their directions carefully, because they have a lot of great advice on how to write a personal biography, how to create a brand and an image on LinkedIn that's attractive to prospective employers, and it's your very best source of information. The other thing that we're not going to have time to cover, which I regret, actually a couple of things. I'm not going to have a lot of time to show you our website, but I'll try to give you a quick view here before the hour. The other thing is I brought along a job description for Director of Quality at Johnson City Medical Center. It's still open if any of you want to apply. There's a description of the scope of the position and their requirements. And I was going to have you form in groups and talk about what's really important in applying to this position, but obviously we're time limited. I'll leave that here, and for those of you who can get a copy, great. Otherwise, Dr. Corey will assist you. Okay, so I want to show you one part of our website quickly. If you go to career development, and over on the right, you'll see what can I do with this major. Click on that. It takes a minute to open. This is the patient's test part of the presentation. There we go. You get a list of majors and go to public health, and you will find a list, not of everything you can do in public health, but of major areas in public health, who the employers are, and some sample titles and some general information and strategies. So you see health policy and management, behavioral science, biostatistics, epidemiology, environmental and occupational health, global health, etc. And here's the other thing I want you to know about. Go all the way to the bottom. There's a list of professional associations in public health. I think that it's a wonderful resource because some of them actually publish articles online. Not all of them, but some do. You can kind of get up to speed with what people are talking about this month. That can be helpful to you in staying in tune with your area. Occupational outlook information leads to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There are thorough descriptions, including salary trends for these areas. You will also find a link that says related areas. So there's more than just these four things. And it's a chance for you to get everything from, again, salary indicators to what a day is like in this kind of environment. And then there's a lot of miscellaneous sites which are also helpful. What is public health, health management, careers? So I encourage you to use this as you think about where in public health do I want to go? Because it kind of helps you sort things out and maybe make some comparisons among competing fields that you're interested in. And I need to stop, unfortunately, but thank you all for being a great audience. I enjoyed talking with you.